Okay, guys, it is Friday afternoon, and we had another really excellent conversation last night. But for us to continue, for us to move forward, it's going to be really, really helpful if everybody's familiar with some of these cognitive maps. So I want to be sure that you know where you're going on this and you have a way of finding them and all. So if you go to justconflict.org, you go to the handouts, and you come back here down here to complexity maps. You can look around other stuff on this site here, and it will take you to this page. You can also go to the pilgrimage page, and just particularly when you're looking at it, complexity and justice is our space here. And I got the maps here as well. There's one of the maps that I didn't put up here, so you can find them in multiple places. I'm going to actually go back to the ones here because I know what they do. So, so the big question that we were approaching last night had to do with whether or not these maps are really useful. I mean, so what? They're interesting, they're kind of novel, but do they actually help us solve problems? So I want to give you some examples of the way I see them solving problems for me and potentially for humanity. So you can kind of see whether these are going to be working for you in your life, because I think they really do help. So, but you have to have a certain familiarity with them. So I want you to spend some time before next Thursday. Just spend some time with each of these maps. There's a couple here that I particularly want to look at. This is the one on spiral dynamics. I'm actually going to come back to this one. So you can see here that there's a lot of text in there. You kind of have to zoom in to be able to read it better. This one this is actually six maps in one. Six maps in one. Because there's about types and there's about spiral dynamics. And this one is one I don't even really fully understand, but it talks about first, second, and third tier and ego development stages. And this is, I think, Aurobindo's framework here. They don't have it labeled that way. This has to do with lines of development and states of consciousness. And this is also one that's really hard to get your head around. You really need to read some texts about that. This is the fundamental Aqua Map. Basically, it's all four quadrants, four of them, obviously, quadrants, that have to do with what happens in our own interior, what happens in the collective, interior, exterior, individual, collective, and you kind of, if you read in these, you can see what we're talking about there. But I want to go back to this is the general map of the orders of being. This is a specific map of the orders of being as it pertains to who we are as separate persons, or as we see ourselves as separate. And it's specifically about how it is that we function as in developing consciousness. So I'm gonna try and give it a little bigger piece to work from here. So we start out here at first order, where we are experiencing our experience. We go to second order, where we now make choices that impact our experience. And at each level of development, we move up to the next level because there's something that I need in my life. There's a problem that I want to be able to solve that I can't at the level of thinking that I'm using. So I need a more complex map. When we look at developmental sequences, we can readily see that there are a set number of them. Everybody goes through the same ones, and you can't skip one. You can't go from crawling to running without going through standing and walking to get there. There are some people who, as they grew up, they didn't crawl for whatever reason, went straight to walking. And what we discover is they have certain neurological problems, because crawling actually helps you kind of do the binary moving back and forth. You kind of learn to, it integrates the corpus callosum and integrates the left and right hemispheres. So we really can't skip a step. We have to work through each of them. You will not be able to do calculus if you can't do trigonometry. So when we are understanding problems as they arise, where the problems that arise for us are because the way we're thinking about the problem is not sufficient to give us a way of approaching it that will actually solve it. There's a lot of perfectly valid ways of understanding a problem. But if I don't have one that gives me something I can do that will solve it, I'm stuck. There are a potentially infinite number of ways of defining a problem, but most of them are not very helpful. So can I define this problem in such a way that it helps me actually solve it? A couple of wonderful things from Albert Einstein that pertain to this is one is he suggests when you're solving a problem, use the simplest solution possible, but no simpler, because there are some solutions that are too simple to actually solve the problem. The other one he says is that, or another one, there's lots of kind of aphorisms from him, but another one is, you cannot solve a problem with the level of thinking that you're using to cause the problem. Any level of thinking is limited. It doesn't take into account everything. And so as a result, sometimes there are problems that arise that we can't solve. We need to be able to use a bigger map, or in some cases, adopt a more inclusive paradigm. We have to really move into a larger way of thinking. So when we're trying to solve a problem in our life, and particularly, as we were talking about last night, particularly we're talking about a problem that is we see, but the others don't see, or they don't see it in a way that really allows them to appreciate how big the problem is. So the problems associated with making abortion illegal are so much bigger than the problems that are supposedly solved by doing that. So I want to go back here for just a moment. We're gonna look at this spiral dynamics map. This is one, in this particular iteration of it, talks about both individual and collective behavior, because he talks about what age people are at when they, get into this particular stage of development, and these are only suggestions. But I want to look at this from the point of view of how it is that human communities develop. So down here, we're at survival bands, and these started about 100,000 years ago, and they're pretty limited, right? We get to purple, and now there's tribal order, but we're keeping the spirits happy is what we're doing. But there are many more things that you can do with a more ordered community, like within a tribe. We talked a bit about that last night. If you're going to try and link a bunch of tribes together, you're going to have somebody be in charge. So you end up with a feudal and sometimes exploitive empire. You've got a warlord. Somebody's in charge of this whole thing and tells others what to do. But that can be tyrannical. And so at blue, or sometimes amber, depending upon which framework you're looking at, but at this level, what you have is a rule-based system of ethics and typically religion that says this is the way we're supposed to be. And it contains the excesses of red. So blue helps to stabilize things. The problem is that blue can also be very stultifying and limiting people into very specific roles. It mentions here, one of the pitfalls is archetypal role identification. Right? So orange gives a greater freedom, and this is from the orders of being typology. This is fourth order. This is first, second, third, fourth, and fifth orders. When we get to orange, now we have capitalistic democracies. We can set goals, we can measure success, but of course there are pitfalls at any level. And we address those by green, which is the social democracies. And basically what we're looking for is, can't we just all get along here? Right? I got a dog who wants out. So if we look at this in terms of how it is that communities function broadly, and when they're a problem, how we deal with it. So the US and Canada and most of the developed nations have become social democracies. They were capitalist, but there's leaning towards green. We're kind of the move from orange to green, but basically we operate here typically. Although certain folks want a theocracy, which would be blue, and the Make America Great Again is really kind of more of a feudal and authoritarian warlords situation. So 9/11 happens. We discover that there are people in the world who don't like us. They are afraid of us. They see us as being oppressive to them. And in fact, I think that's an accurate perspective. But they attack us by flying a couple of planes into the World Trade Center. And we react to that by saying, we're going to go to the heart of these countries that are what we see as the problem, basically Iraq and Afghanistan. Each of them functioning down here at red. In Iraq, you have Saddam Hussein, who is a warlord who's keeping everybody else in check. It's even less organized in Afghanistan, but various countries, like most notably the Soviet Union, tried to move in and dominate that. But the remoteness of Afghanistan and the power of the warlords is such that we couldn't do anything about that. One of the things that's going on in Afghanistan, though, is that we have the rise of the Taliban. And the Taliban are trying to bring everybody together, but they're doing it under a kind of fundamentalist form of Islam, which we find odious. So what we're going to do is we're going to install our own democracy. We're going to do regime change here. And we're going to move to orange and possibly even to green, but we'll settle for orange here. And we spend many, many years and billions of dollars and uncounted lives trying to make Afghanistan into a capitalistic democracy. And finally, a year ago, we gave up on that. Right? And the Taliban quickly rushed into the vacuum. The Taliban is actually an improvement over the warlords. And what we foolishly thought we could do is we could go straight from warlords all the way to democracies. We thought the same thing in Iraq. We can go through from Saddam Hussein into a democracy there. But one of the things that we've learned is you can't skip a step. Well, actually, we haven't learned it yet when it comes to regime change. But we do know from other developmental sequences that, in fact, we have to go through all of this. There has to be a certain level of development at each stage before we can go to the next stage. So you'll notice we've got some space up here. We can move to higher orders of being than where we are at this point. So if we're in a situation where we know somebody who we think is not making good choices in their life and we want to help them change, we cannot move them to where, if we're functioning up here at green, for example, we can't get them, if they're at red, up to green without moving them through amber and orange to green. So for example, if we know somebody who is a drug addict, alcoholic, one of the things that we can do is to help them move into a third order way of being, which is structured in a community called Alcoholics Anonymous. And that can help move them. They can go from being in charge of their own lives to listening to somebody else who's going to tell them what to do. They're going to move up into that interpersonal realm where they have a relationship with a sponsor and with a program, and they work the steps. Now, oftentimes with somebody who's an addict, there's somebody living with them or closely associated with them who is a co-addict, or they're a codependent. They're already up here at amber. They know how to do what other people want them to do. They know exactly what to do to keep their addict happy, but it keeps the addict stuck. So the person who's codependent, they need to move up to orange. So they have a different set of goals here in terms of the transformation of their lives. As it turns out, the same 12 steps work remarkably well for any kind of transformation. So if you're at red, you need AA. If you're at amber, you need Al-Anon. And there are many other kinds of technologies for transformation, and we're going to talk more about that as we prepare for next Thursday. But the point here is that I want you to see that if you've got somebody who says, hey, I'm at sixth order, but they're not actually at sixth order, because they're really, when you listen to them, they say, no, they're actually pretty profoundly at third order. You're not going to get them to sixth order. In fact, they think they're already there. What you can do is help them see how what they're doing is in their way, how they have a barrier to actually moving to a robust fourth order construction. Now, I want to say again, I've said this before, but it bears repeating many times. We are all at all of the orders all of the time. These are orders of being. We are at all of these orders. The thing is, we don't know it, because our consciousness is something that goes through a developmental process. So through our lives, our consciousness, our awareness, the cognitive maps that we use, little by little will grow, unless, and this was another theme from last night, unless we're stuck, we can't continue to grow. We will not continue to grow if there's something about the trauma that we've experienced from the past that's really getting in our way. And so we have to work through our trauma, and that really, we don't really get into working at that with much depth until we get to fifth order. There are parts of Al-Anon or Codependence Anonymous, children of children, I can't remember, all these different acronyms. There's all these different 12-step groups for dealing with different kinds of things. But the point is that they all have some reflection at fifth order, because you can't really work through the trauma until you begin to know your own interiority. But you're not going to do that if you're drinking. First thing you got to do is you got to get sober, and you're going to do that when you get help from others. Some folks say, I'm going to do this on my own. You can actually stop using whatever addictive substance on your own, maybe, but you're not actually going to be in recovery, because the recovery isn't just not using the substance. It's actually moving into a third order and fourth order, an interpersonal, a relational way of being, and living in that consciousness, living in that space of relationship in which we're building stronger relationships with each other. And that means learning to ask for help, learning to listen to your sponsor, learning to be a part of a community. So when we're helping people change, if that's kind of we've set ourselves out to be agents of change in the world. If we're going to do that, we're going to do that by figuring out, well, where are they now? By being able to be aware enough of our own consciousness that we can see where they are, such that we can help them see what's the next step. Because if we get ahead of them, if we try to move them too far, too fast, they're going to blow us off. We have to solve their problem with our tools. We can't solve our problem with their tools. Did I say that right? You know what I mean. And in any case, compassion is about knowing where they are, and to be able to use our perspective to help them make the growth they need. So, for example, last night we were talking about how do we deal with gun violence, and there's some people who really feel like they need to have a gun in order to feel safe. We're not going to help them feel safe by taking their guns away. We need to figure out what's going on, help them figure out what's going with them that they feel so unsafe, and what could they do that would actually create greater safety. Because it's not the people who oppose gun ownership who are going to solve the problem of gun safety. It's going to be solved by the people who are actually owning, possessing the guns. Just like we're not going to solve racism by getting Black folks to speak up. We're going to solve racism by getting white folks to change how it is that we show up in our relationships with people of color. The change has to happen from that part of society that's actually causing the problem. But the people who are causing the problem usually don't see that they're causing the problem. And so the transformation that we're looking for is helping them see what they can do to solve their problem, given where they are in the developmental sequence. All right. I wish it were simpler. Well, it is simple. It's just not easy. All right. So I'm going to give you some more about technologies for transformation, and I will see you Thursday.